Infamous Second Son lives up to its name far more than I had ever anticipated. It's definitely infamous, not just by name, but also by reputation. It's a game that does things really well while completely fumbling different parts of the experience in pretty disappointing ways. Infamous is one of the few franchises out there that I think everyone would be happy to see either a remake of or a completely new title from. But as we know, Sucker Punch Productions, the studio behind the series, has since moved on to the Ghost franchise, but some of their best games arguably came out before Tsushima ever existed. The first two games in this series are constantly brought up in conversation as some of the best from the PS3 era, but for some reason, Second Son never really reaches those same heights when it's talked about. Its reputation during the PS4 era was never as good. I recently wrapped up my playthrough of Second Son, and I was left pretty conflicted by the end of it. So this video is going to be everything I have to say about Infamous Second Son. Now, as you may or may not know, the Infamous series is largely built on two pillars that drive the entire experience: the karma system and the near non-stop destructive combat. Second Son is no different. There are choices to make that drive the main character, who goes by Delsin, into becoming good or evil, and the powers that Delsin wields are unique and just fun to mess around with. Those foundations are solid, and the rendition of Seattle that Sucker Punch created was an absolute joy to experience, but everything I liked about this game felt very surface level. Infamous is either a superhero game or a supervillain game depending on how you decide to play it. For my own playthrough, I went the evil route. In fact, every game I've played in this series ended with me going that same way. Whether or not that decision is canon is a whole different discussion, but I think most people prefer the good playthrough, and I kind of see why. That being said, playing the role of a villain means Delsin comes equipped with 4 different powers at his disposal. He is a conduit, but he's different because he can absorb other conduits' powers, making him one of a kind. His powers by the end of the game include smoke, neon, video, and concrete, which are some definitely interesting choices. Either way, combat itself is just pure fun. That's really the only way to describe it. Delsin is agile, he's quick and nimble for the most part, which made getting around in these combat encounters engaging. There were moments where he felt like he would stick to surfaces a little bit too much. When I would try to jump off a wall or climb a ledge, there would be a little bit of frustration here and there, but that didn't affect my overall experience. Now, of course, depending on the power that you're using, the combat experience can change, but not that significantly. And this is where things started to kind of come apart for me. Now, don't get me wrong, I still really enjoyed the core combat experience, but I felt like I wanted more out of the powers that were given. The power I had most fun with was Neon, but what separates these powers in general feels pretty thin, and that's mostly the skill tree's fault. Outside of how the core attack works, whether it's a spray or a single shot or a burst, and the different special attacks that you get which require some ammo to use, the core kit feels pretty basic. Like, some abilities I barely even remembered I had, like the smoke ability that allows you to confuse and stun enemies, or the ability to go invisible with video. Either way, all of the combat encounters can be cleared with just one power, meaning there aren't any scenarios or enemies that require you to use one power over the other, which I ended up kind of liking. It gives you that freedom to play the game how you see fit. If you like the neon powers and you just want to use that, you can go that route. Now, like I mentioned, the actual flow is fun. Free aim shots feel really good, and I liked how where you shoot someone mattered when the neon power came into play. For example, shooting someone in the head grants evil karma, whereas a shot to their feet brings good karma because you didn't just kill somebody. It's a nice way to farm your karma all while playing the game naturally. The other powers similarly are solid, but once I got the video power, I sort of just stuck with that one since I really like the SMG-like spray that its basic attack has. Of course, I do need to mention the ultimate abilities that build up as you combo kills together. The orbital drop is just so fun and satisfying to pull off, and the same goes for Radiant Sweep. Those two were my favorites, and the destruction that gets left behind is pretty impressive. Now, as far as the difficulty went, the game never felt that hard. It was definitely challenging at times, but I never felt like I needed to turn the difficulty down or raise it up. Playing on normal felt right. Delsin himself can take quite quite a few hits before he dies, but the fade to white screen was a pretty bad choice. Sure, it's a clear indicator that you're knocking on death's door, but that visual effect combined with the sound just wasn't ideal for me. Talk about nitpicking, am I right? I think the powers are unique, and that's what matters the most, but I couldn't shake how odd the video power felt. Like smoke, concrete, and I guess neon could all sort of relate to one another in a weird way, but the video power was just out of left field. I know conduits are basically able to control all forms of matter and energy, but I don't know, were there no other options other than video? Like maybe water would have been cool. Anyway, I won't harp on this too long. I will say I think the boss fight for getting the video power is the best of the bunch. In fact, I think it's probably the best fight that the game has. So let's dig into that a little bit. A game like Infamous works well when it has a wide variety of enemies to take down. Unfortunately, that is not the case here. There are a standard set of enemies, which are the DUP guys or dupe guys, whatever you want to call them, and within their ranks there are some differences that I appreciated. You got your standard dudes who can shoot an assault rifle but go down within a few hits. There are snipers as well, but then you get a special set of soldiers who were augmented with the power of concrete by the game's main villain, Augustine. She's given some amongst her ranks a bit of power. They're nowhere near as capable as she is, but they make fights more interesting. Some can leap far distances, put up walls of concrete as shields, hurl gigantic boulders at you, among other attacks. Some of them are fast, others are big brutes who move slow, but they can definitely pack a punch. I really enjoyed fighting those special types of enemies, but realistically, that's about it. There isn't much more variety there. There's also this one gang called the Curians or something like that, but they are very basic enemies who wield pistols, and that's about it. I really don't even know why they exist in this game. I don't know if they were supposed to have a bigger presence at some point, but I think they're there for like 1 or 2 missions. That being said, the game could have definitely taken some influence from its predecessors where there were factions vying for control of different districts within the city, and I get that the DUP presence would have stifled that, and it works as an excuse, but that's just my wishful thinking. Boss fights I felt like were meant to be the highlight of the game combat-wise, but realistically only 2 of the fights are worth mentioning. The video fight is very cool. You get transported to what basically looks like hell, all while fighting demons and angels. The aesthetic is cool, the fight itself requires switching between powers, and there are some mechanics involved that help the fight stay engaging, like the platforms shifting and angels providing the boss a shield that you need to take out. That was the longest sentence I think I've ever written. I like fights like this where there are multiple things to manage and consider. The fight does last a while though, which makes the boss's health pool feel a little bit too large. The second best fight is the final fight against Augustine, where she transforms into this giant concrete spider thing. It's fun because to me, it's the hardest fight in the game. There's a small arena to fight in and a bunch of attacks that you need to learn to deal with. Now, I do think the weakest part of the fight is the simple fact that you're stripped away of all your powers, only to learn the final power that is concrete in the very last fight. I'm not sure who decided to design things this way, but yeah, that is just a total misstep in my humble and honest opinion. Regardless, the fight is still solid, and I did actually end up dying a few times, which was a rarity for me given how the game was going. Now, I do want to get into the skill system, but first I want to thank this video's partner, World of Sea Battle, a free-to-play open-world pirate MMO that's available on PC through Steam and the official website. In World of Sea Battle, you start out with a small ship, take on quests, trade resources, and fight other players in PvP until you gradually build your own fleet. There are more than 50 ships to unlock and fully customize with hundreds of possible builds depending on how you want to play. You can focus on just trading, maybe join a guild, and get involved with the faction wars. Or you can just embrace the pirate lifestyle and start sinking everybody that you come across. Progression is also much faster than you might expect from an MMO. Experienced players can reach a top tier ship within 1 or 2 weeks rather than grinding for months. World of Sea Battle is free to download, and anyone who uses my link will receive 5 days of Captain Seals for 40% bonus XP and gold, plus 6 additional ship slots. Check out the link in the description and start building your fleet today. Now let's get back to the video. Of course, all the powers do tie into the skill system. Throughout the game, you naturally earn shards by finding them scattered around the open world, shooting down drones, or completing different side missions and main missions. There isn't a traditional XP system. And these days, I've started to find more enjoyment in games that do not have an XP bar to grind, but instead, character improvement and development is done by simply exploring and completing quests. I praise Star Wars Outlaws for having a similar approach, and it's one of many games that do so. It makes exploring more rewarding, and that same thing applies here in Infamous Second Son. I would go out of my way to get another drone shot down, or maybe spray paint a wall. Unfortunately, the actual skills that you can purchase aren't all that. The upgrades are incremental, some can have impactful changes, but for the most part, they're pretty tame. A bit more efficiency using a power is cool, I guess. More shots being fired between bursts is also helpful, but none of the upgrades felt game changing. And that presents one of the biggest issues that the game has. The skill tree is functional, sure, but it's not deep, and this is the kind of game that would benefit from a deep skill tree. Imagine having the ability to combine skills in some form or fashion, or how about having the charge skill become the default attack at the cost of lower efficiency? I'm just spitballing ideas here, but the skills are what make the game fun, and they never really evolve much from the very first time you equip them. Something about this game just felt rushed overall, and when it came to the powers, it's likely the fact that they just wanted to get this thing out when the PS4 launched. Anyway, let's move on and talk about getting around the city because I think this is something the game absolutely excels in. I've played many superhero equivalent games and traversal mechanics are almost always hit or miss. I told myself I wouldn't do many comparisons in this video, but here we are. If you've played Gotham Knights, then you'd know that the way to get around the city is unintuitive and very janky no matter who you are playing as. It feels bad and it looks bad. Also, the bat cycle doesn't help much. For the record, I thought Gotham Knights was a solid game. Do with that information what you will. Then you have a game like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which unironically has some of the best movement mechanics I've used in any game. It's too bad about the rest of the game though. Then we have more prominent superhero games like Spider-Man and the Arkham series. Now, I won't pretend like I ever played the Arkham series, so I can't comment on that, but Spider-Man 1 and 2 clearly understand the fantasy of being Spider-Man. It's fast, it's fluid, and it's fun to get around. All this was a roundabout way of saying that Infamous Second Son has really great ways to get around, better than some existing superhero games. You can hover freely in midair, leaping between buildings feels great, the different powers giving different ways to move around the city. For example, with smoke, you can dash up to twice in midair and go through vents to shoot up above a building. With neon, you can dash around the city or climb walls the same way. With video, you can fly for a short time and ascend up basically any wall similar to Neon, and all those different powers just made it really fun to get around. But I will admit that one thing really annoyed me was basically losing traversal abilities when I had a different power equipped. For example, I would try running up a wall, then only realize that I had smoke as my current power, which had me running around the city to find the closest neon sign. That's a nitpick and a minor annoyance, but it just stood out to me when I was moving around. It would have been far better to just freely switch between powers at the press of a button rather than needing to go and find that power source before being able to actually use it, but maybe I'm just lazy. Now, the actual open world that the game takes place in is really well done. Seattle looks amazing, and given how old this game is at this point, it still had me stopping in my tracks to catch a view. The Lantern District gets a special shout out for being aesthetically pleasing. When an open world looks as good as this one does, existing in it is just so much easier. In Second Son, the DUP is on the hunt for you. They have bases and checkpoints set up everywhere across the city. This matters because it changes how active the open world is. Anytime you come across them, you're basically in for a fight. Each district has its own DUP presence, which funnels into one of the game's main progression systems. Bringing down the DUP by doing things like destroying their bases, there are surveillance cameras that dot the streets, spray painting anti-corruption art, and doing some small side missions all feed into this resistance system. Once they lose a certain amount of control, you can take over the area and basically completely eliminate their presence. It's simple stuff, but it works pretty well here. Depending on how you're perceived by the general population, you'll find civilians that either are in favor of you or are completely terrified and hate you enough to the point where they attack you. This started happening to me and I found it hilarious. Towards the end of the game, I had almost reached the infamous karma rank, and random folks on the street would just run up to me and start punching me. At some point, I died after being jumped by a group of civilians when I was already in a weakened state. Being a conduit means there are anti-conduit protesters and protests going on around the city, and it's small things like that which add more immersion. And the fact that you can break these protests apart how you see fit is a nice way to really seal your karmic fate. The city feels alive, and that's what I liked most about it. There was always something to do nearby, and I've read a few reviews where it's mentioned how the city just felt shallow, and while I can see that argument, I think the city accomplished what it had to do by being a huge playground for all your powers that you have and all the freedom to create as much chaos as you want. The mission variety is another area where Second Son feels completely fine at first, but the repetition starts to become a real problem later on. Most missions give you a reason to move through Seattle. You're either fighting a group of DUP soldiers, destroying some equipment, chasing someone down, or clearing out a heavily defended area. None of this is inherently bad because the combat and traversal are good enough to carry these objectives. Blasting through a checkpoint or chasing a target across rooftops or tearing apart an entire group of soldiers is fun because controlling Delsin feels good. Not great, but good. The issue, however, is that the game keeps rearranging the same handful of ideas without doing much to change them. A lot of the main missions eventually turn into another combat arena, and even when the story gives you a different objectives, it usually ends up with you fighting the DUP at some point or another. The side content is also more of the same. You're destroying cameras, you're tracking down agents, and spray painting walls. Also, quick shout out to the motion controls. I can't remember the last time I had to turn my controller sideways and shake it, no matter how awkward it may have looked to someone who might have walked by my door. Either way, I liked the fact that I was gradually removing the DUP control from Seattle because it gave me an excuse to explore and collect shards and spend more time messing around with the powers, but the actual activities never really evolved from the base set, which is kind of my problem. Once you cleared one district, you basically understand how clearing the rest of them is going to work. There are a few moments that stand out, especially the boss fights that I mentioned before, and some of the sequences built around unlocking new powers, but those feel more like exceptions. I wouldn't say the mission design is outright bad. The basic structure works and the game is short enough that it never becomes unbearable, but it definitely starts to feel formulaic in the back half. As we know, karma is the center of the entire Infamous experience. This has been true from the very first game. Every choice you make throughout your playthrough either pushes you to good or evil. Second Son follows this same system, and depending on who you ask, it might be a step back from its predecessors. I won't do a full-on comparison in this video, but I will when I do my full Infamous series playthrough. That being said, there are many ways to push Delsin one way or another. Being evil meant I could mindlessly kill civilians, I could stop protesters with violence, and I could deny people's surrenders. Truthfully, I had to turn my brain off a bit to play the evil route because I always tend to lean into being the good guy in just about any game that offers these sorts of choices. Unfortunately, there really isn't much nuance to Delsin. He either becomes a really moral and good person, or he becomes someone he probably would have hated at the beginning of the game. A brutal and unpredictable murderer who doesn't really care for anybody. The issue with this is that the skill system pushes you hard in one direction or the other. To get the best skills, you really need to become fully infamous or heroic. Otherwise, you're just locked out. But that's fair, I guess, since this would open up the possibility of doing another playthrough to experience both endings. Now, I felt like the evil choices I made during the story weren't really all that evil. I guess one of them was kind of bad, but corrupting other conduits really wasn't all that crazy. There are, I believe, a total of 5 choices to make, and the last one is more or less made for you based on your existing karma. The cast of characters that make up the main story are also pretty damn boring. Not a single character has much depth to them, and I only found Reggie, who is Delsin's brother, to be the most entertaining of the bunch. He provided everything between comedic relief and being that person that at least attempts to keep Delsin in check. He's the voice of reason, which is more prevalent in the evil playthrough. There are like 5 total characters you meet throughout the game, including the main antagonist who goes by Augustine. Augustine was actually an interesting villain, which kind of surprised me. Again, she's also not all that deep, but her motivation that was revealed at the end of the game was at least different from the cliche villain arc. She wants to protect conduits, and she's doing it in her own strange way by basically hunting them down and imprisoning them. It's too bad we only learn more about her character when we're basically wrapping the game up. Outside of those two, the rest of the cast is very forgettable. Delson is interesting in his own right, but I can't help but feel like the evil playthrough just doesn't fit his character. Now, the game does have two endings, but I only played through the game once, and all I can say is that the evil ending is pretty damn evil, so I have to give them props where they're due. I was kind of surprised at how short the game ended up being. I somehow made it to the final mission without even realizing that I was at the end. I think I was maybe 9 or 10 hours deep, and I looked up how many more missions I had left, only to learn that I was more or less done with the game. Of course, the runtime would be much longer if I cleared every district, collected every shard, and so on, but the main story push goes by really fast, so hey, if you're looking for a game that you can knock out in like 12 hours, you found one. Graphically, the game is stellar. It looks amazing. The game has really good lighting. The powers look slick. The destruction that you can cause is solid. I played it on the PS5 Pro, and I'm not sure that made any difference, but hey, I had a really good experience with it. There were times where it looked like the contrast was off or the game would look a little bit too dark, but those moments were few and far between. Honestly, Infamous Second Son is a very solid game, but when people say that it's actually the worst in the series, I can kind of see what they mean. I mean, it's a fun game. The combat is solid. The traversal is fun. The open world is impressive, but there are things that end up just weighing the game down. The shallow skill tree is one of the biggest problems because this game could have done some really fun stuff with all the different powers at your disposal. The lackluster enemy variety takes a bit out of the otherwise fun combat. Fighting the same dudes over and over and over again can get exhausting. The story, while not terrible, doesn't really have that many impactful decisions to make, considering that the game is heavily built around a karma system. For every positive this game had, there seems to be an equal negative that by the end of it, I felt like I wrapped up playing what felt like a pretty average game. That's not a bad thing. I enjoyed the game for what it is, and the 12 or so hours I spent with it were fun enough. I can completely understand why people still have a soft spot for this game, but for me, it just never really turned into something that was truly memorable. Thank you all for watching this video. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button. A big thank you to all the channel members and Final Save supporters. You guys are the backbone that helps this channel keep on going. Once again, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to hit that like button. If you're new here, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one.